All right, let's get started. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining today's live discussion hosted by Rebellion Ventures. We're excited to have attendees from our portfolio, including founders and their teams, as well as from our LP community and broader network. Today's session explores one of the most fascinating frontiers in AI and autonomous systems, the emergence of the Internet of AI agents. In the near future, billions of autonomous agents could interact on behalf of companies, employees, and consumers, transforming how value and decisions flow across industries like finance, commerce, supply chain, healthcare, and more. And while early protocols like A2A and MCP enable some interoperability, the Agentic Web will require a new type of infrastructure, which we'll discuss today. I'm delighted to introduce Professor Ramesh Raskar from MIT. He leads Project NANDA, an industry-wide initiative to enable the Internet of Agents by creating open, decentralized, and trusted infrastructure for autonomous agents at scale. Ramesh holds over 125 US patents, has co-founded and advised multiple AI startups, and led advanced research with Google X, Facebook, and Apple. He also collaborates with Rebellion Ventures as a principal scientist. Ramesh will present for about 15 minutes, followed by 15 minutes of Q&A. Please submit your questions anytime using Zoom's Q&A feature, and I'll moderate as many as we can after his presentation. With that, Ramesh, thank you for joining us. The floor is yours.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you, Jukka. Wonderful to be here. I'm going to talk about network AI agents in decentralized architecture, short for Nanda, and Nanda is also the name of my sister. I think today we are kind of in the mainframe era of AI. We are centralizing data, centralizing compute, but very soon we're going to shift to the PC of AI, where all of us on the edge can run pretty big models and even train them. And that's kind of driving some of the revolutions in the intranet of AI, where companies have started using AI and AI agents within their organizations. But from there, to the internet, where you can talk to agents in other organizations, across the trust boundaries, and participate in the wisdom economy, which is what we call decentralized AI. But from the internet, we had to move to the web, because the internet was about connecting machines. The World Wide Web was about connecting people, and Nanda is agents. So I want you to imagine this internet of AI agents, where you have an agent for every one of us, for every business, for every device. Trillions of AI agents collaborating across organizational silos, communicating, navigating, learning, earning, and transacting on our behalf, but often autonomously. And within the agentic web, this internet of AI agents is going to go through three phases very quickly. The first one is the foundations. How do you authenticate? How do you trust these agents, like getting a passport? Second is agentic commerce. Like when you move to a city, you have to find a job, but very soon there are companies, there are stock markets, there's Groupons, there's collective bargaining, and then agentic societies, where we start creating new universities or new sports clubs, justice system, religion, and so on. And we think agents will also go through these three phases. First is foundations, uh, agent economy, and agent society. And if you see the bottom row, that's where a lot of the action is right now, more on the syntactic layer. A2A, MCP, as you just mentioned, X.402 from Coinbase, AP2 from Asian Payment Protocol from Google, and so on. Some other work from our group called Ripple Effect Protocol. So all the stuff on the bottom row here, is we're seeing a lot of action right now. But from the syntax collaboration, we had to move to the control plane and the system plane, right? This is where exciting things are going to happen, like knowledge pricing, trust and reputation, learning from each other, and so on. And then finally, the global plane, right? This is where exciting stuff is going to happen. I give an idea of like agents that create their own, collective bargaining platforms, and so on. So there's a lot of stuff that's going to happen. It's going to take 5 years to go through these phases, or 3 years, or 2 years, I don't know. but we're going to go through this very, very quickly. The problem is we might see this agentic web, but will it remain open or will it get closed? If you look at what's on the left, it looks more like the World Wide Web, where you have consumers talking through open standards. And then there is a cottage industry, a very dynamic ecosystem where all kinds of agents and consumers and businesses are interacting with each other. On the right side is like closed platforms, right? This is what we see in today's App Store and Play Store, where there's a lot of walled gardens. Often there's disintermediation, but more importantly, a consumer can interact with other consumers and other services only through an app store or agent store, as you can call them going forward. And this agent store can really create, very opaque algorithms, opaque governance. They can do rent seeking, they can do their own bias prioritization, and they could take 30% of your revenue and so on. So we hope that we'll end up more like the open agentic web as opposed to the closed platform that you see on App Store, Play Store, or Facebook, Twitter, and so on. And if you look at this red curve, we think over the next, we already have platforms that have hundreds of millions of users, right? We think next 6 months are about very intense protocol wars and partnership wars. I mean, you just saw OpenAI has a partnership with Walmart, for example, right? That could really unleash, fantastic creativity, but can also lead to walled gardens. So next 6 months are about protocol and partnership wars. 6 months after that, our network effects start setting in, and there's a platform competition. They start becoming more and more closed. And then eventually you have monopolies or duopolies or oligopolies, but there may be only like 3 players over the world that control the agentic stores and agentic web. And that's where ecosystem lock-in comes in, service dependencies, and there's innovation friction, global south cannot participate, and so on. And that's what's going to lead to a lot of despair because we'll become intelligent slaves to these big companies and unrest. So, and it's kind of game over for most investors and most startups because they're beholden to 2 or 3 large platforms. But we could be on the green curve where we continue to insist on two-way open protocols, not one-way open protocol. A lot of .orgs emerged, like W3C, Mozilla, ICANN emerged in the previous wave. We need new .orgs to emerge. And then maybe the long tail wins. People writing their recipes and cat videos. That's what we need to make sure this remains open. And there's a lot of creativity, a lot of craziness. And that's how small businesses and medium-sized businesses are going to win. We'll have this pluralism. And if you're a fan of Adam Smith and the Invisible Hand, the shared prosperity is what we will see there. But nevertheless, the window to keep the agentic web open is really closing. So the question is, what is Nanda doing about it? So on the right side is what we all understand, the agent frameworks, the LangChain, the Crew AI, ADK, and so on. This is on the right side. We understand how to build this. But on the left side is the agentic web. This is like the OSS stack of the internet. And this needs to be built. There are many players in each of these boxes, but the goal for Nanda is to create a Nanda. They're all interoperable, they're all portable, they're all open and vibrant. And we think there are 4 choke points. 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm going to talk very briefly about them. Are the ones that are really going to make a difference if we want to keep the agentic web open. The message here is that we are kind of in a post-AI world, and most of the entrepreneurial activity will be in the quilt of AI and AI agents as opposed to AI itself. This is what we also saw in the mainframe and the PC era of the early 90s, where making a better PC was not as lucrative as connecting those PCs and creating the internet. And the same thing is happening now. Building a better and better AI has diminishing returns, but connecting those AIs is going to be extremely lucrative going forward. So as I said, there are 4 choke points, and we can talk about that during Q&A. But the very first choke point, is to make sure that there's an equivalent of DNS for all these AI agents. There are billions, maybe trillions of agents. How do you make sure that this DNS is, and we're working very closely with Cisco and Akamai and Dell and many companies to do this. We'll have an announcement coming very soon. Second is you want the equivalent of CEA that exists on the web, certifying authority. We need verifiable credentials for that as well. The third is interoperability. You want to create a telephone system as opposed to an intercom. So just as today in the telephone system, you can use a landline, mobile phones, IP You could be in any country, you could be roaming, you could have an Android phone, you can have a lot of variety, and the telephone system still works. There's a telephone exchange, there's a phone book, right? All these things work. We need new kind of adapters for any agent to talk to any other agent. And then finally, we need a way to, before deploying these agents, we want to have safety and checks. And before you launch a car, you need to put it through a crash test. And the same thing we need for agents or their test tracks. So those are the four main choke points we think for this ecosystem. We didn't have this crash test and test tracks for social media, by the way. That's why we're still suffering from the positives, but also the negatives of social media. So we think that these four choke points that we need to solve, and we have a really amazing community that's writing software, doing open source, doing reference implementation. We have investors, we have founders raising millions of dollars, either through these choke points or things that are built on top of that. So we encourage you to go on our website, try all these things out, and I'll stop there. Thank you.
Fantastic. Ramesh, thank you for the terrific presentation. And now we'll shift to Q&A. And as a reminder to everyone, please feel free to ask questions using Zoom's Q&A feature. So you can just drop in your questions there, and then I'll moderate. So the first question we'll start with is that Ramesh, you're working closely with both large tech vendors as well as early stage startups on the Internet of Agents. How are their perspectives or priorities different, and what does that tell you about how the ecosystem might evolve from here?
I think the pie here is so big that even large companies realize that they don't want to be the next Nokia or MySpace. These are the players that thought they're the incumbent, but they lost their game in a matter of 2 or 3 years. MySpace to Facebook, and of course Nokia to iPhone. And so I think the good news is that most large companies are very interested in building an open web, and they would rather make money from downstream services. Of course, there's some players who are going to be bully, and they're going to say, hey, listen, we got enough users, we can create our own walled garden. But the good news is that almost everybody is working with us, with Project NANDA, with MIT, to do that. And of course, I think this is a very critical moment for startups and investors and medium businesses, because we could be on the curve where there's ecosystem lock-in, and startups that have raised 10, 20, $100 million will see a drastic drastic ecosystem lock-in, and they can't grow beyond maybe making $1 billion, $2 billion. That's it. And I think we want to avoid that for sure.
And as we have quite a few startups and their teams here attending this session today, how would you advise startups and their founders and teams to incorporate the Internet of Agents in their strategy and roadmap? And how might you advise them in terms of potentially getting started with NANDA?
Yeah, I would say the two things that come to my mind, and I know you have a very strong portfolio in the AI and AI agents. I think we have to get out of this mainframe mindset, because everybody's building kind of API-based solutions, right? And we want to get away from that. Or some people are moving to the intranet, but nevertheless, they're still calling APIs and staying within the trusted topology. We have to get outside that and start thinking about how do we put the agents and AI systems on the internet so they can all talk to each other. I think that's where the real value is. And the second is make sure that if you do start deploying these systems, that there's no vendor lock and you're actually using open agentic web things. So one common mistake I've seen is startups start using one-way open protocols, right? Where say, hey, I'm using a protocol for somebody, but that only allows me to talk to that ecosystem, but I cannot take what I do in one wall garden and apply it to somewhere else, right? And Facebook did this in the beginning, where they say we have APIs, but you can only talk to Facebook users, for example. That's an example of a one-way open protocols. So I think it's very critical to kind of keep your eyes open and insist on two-way open protocols.
And for those who are interested in learning more about NANDA and all the different technical initiatives that are going on within that umbrella, what advice or pointers would you have in terms of what they could do next?
Yeah, we have a lot of activities here. We have, you can join. There are regional chapters. There's a Bay Area regional chapter. There's a Boston regional chapter. There's one in UAE, one in Paris. There's a fellows program. If you're a developer, you want to contribute to open source, of course, you can do it anytime. But we also have paid fellowships to contribute to open source. Many companies have given funding or they're contributing employees join open source. We have a lot of research papers that are being written. It's a massive research community because it's such an early field. So you can join us to write papers. If you have a nephew or a niece or your own son or daughter, they can also join the youth council. So many ways to participate. But on the technical and research side, I said there's a code base, and many things that are going on there. So definitely join that. We have a lot of players already in this space. You've probably seen like a massive research roadmap. How is this going to work for edge AI and tiny ML and so on, how to create new types of agent stores, knowledge pricing. There's a lot of research that's going on as well. So you can contribute as a researcher, as a developer, as a founder, and so on. We also have a venture hub that allows you to share notes with each other.
There are a few questions here related to agent-to-agent interfacing and interactions. So I'll try to stitch these together in terms of, if you could kind of just touch first briefly in terms of the existing agent-to-agent protocol from Google, in terms of how does this relate to that, and how do you see A2A being open versus proprietary, and then also how do you see the evolution of more agent-to-agent interfacing and communications evolving going forward?
Yeah. So I would say like A2A and MCP are amazing, but at some level, they're like a message bus protocols, right? They're like building an intercom, when you know that one device, one intercom exists on one side, the other exists on the other side, you can connect the two, you can talk to each other. So you don't want to build an intercom, you want to build a telephone system. And so that's why you have to get into the system plane and the global plane that we talk about here. And so the goal for Nanda is to actually move up and not just stay in the syntax in the message plane that's out there. So of course, A2A community and MCP community, for example, is launching its own registry, but that's like the old host.txt files. It's not really building a whole telephone exchange that's out there. And when you think about X.402 or AP2 protocols for transactions, that's when you know that you're about to transact, what should you do? But that's very different than protocols where you have to price the knowledge. You don't even know this is the right agent you should be talking to, and so on. So all these things have to be built. So I would say the good news is that things like A2A and MCP and X.402 are truly two-way open protocols. So that's excellent, and we should adopt all of them. And that's why we have them on this slide. But we have to do so much more than message passing and building an intercom.
And how do you see the adoption in terms of what areas or what types of opportunities do you see where the adoption would first take place, and how it might evolve in terms of different industries or use cases? And there are some questions here also related to regarding how this might play in more regulated industries like finance and healthcare in terms of the agent-to-agent communication and interactions.
Yeah. I mean, it's still early days in terms of the regulated industries, but clearly, auth and identity and privacy and security is paramount. And I would say that, as much as we like to draw this picture, I like to show this slide to everybody, which is the agent chaos that's coming as well. So if you look at these 7 areas, each of them are going to be multi-billion-dollar industries in each of these aspects. And so that agent chaos that we're going to see requires us to create sometimes different kind of control planes, intent mapping, observability, safety, and so on. So these are some really pesky problems that we're going to see in the agentic web. Just as we moved from rule-based systems to non-deterministic systems, we're going to see a lot of chaos. And for founders, it's a great opportunity to jump into many of these spaces. So I would say it's still early days. I mean, honestly, Yuka, even today, there's not a single agent that's online that you can talk to, as with an open endpoint. Everything is behind, some kind of a UX or a dashboard, and so on. So there are very few agents that are out there. So what we did is we launched something called Nest, Nanda, Sandbox, and Test Bench. And we have hundreds. I think right now it's about 500 or so public agents that if your company wants to launch an agent, you can come to the Nest platform and you can have it out there. Think of it as like the first Yahoo pages. When Yahoo started in the mid 90s, it only had like first 50 or some websites. And we want to kind of get that kind of thing going. So the Nest Sandbox allows you to launch, connect to other agents, and so on. But I would say it's early days for highly regulated industries.
Building on that, how do you see the role of building trust and compliance and addressing potential security concerns with this? How do you think about that and the role of NANDA in enabling that?
Yeah. I think so there is agents for traditional security, right? And then security for agents, right? I think most of the deals I'm seeing right now are agentification of the security apparatus. So agents solving today's security problem. I think that's already very exciting. They're looking at bug reports, they're looking at, overflows, and, they can do really good code analysis and so on. So I think that's great. But I think the other way around is going to be even more exciting. Like, how do you have security for agents? Because once you have an agentic web, and as it gets into these highly sensitive areas, building a security framework for agents is going to be exciting. And we can talk more about that. But I think we're going to see multiple, decagons or 100 billion companies just in that space because many of you are kind of vibe coders. I am as well. And I think we're going to create so much technical debt as you start building these agents that it'll be impossible to figure out why they're behaving or misbehaving at any given moment. And that's going to create even more issues as the surface for security and privacy gets even more diffuse. So I think the surface of attack is going to be very poorly understood as they start using vibe coding for launching a lot of these agents. So again, great opportunity for founders.
Yeah. And just a quick observation, as many people are interested in the what types of use cases or opportunities Agentic Web and NANDA could be a good fit for. I think one way to think about that is that there are a number of these industries or use cases where you have a number of stakeholders. So it's somewhat disaggregated or decentralized in terms of large number of participants, and there needs to be some coordination or interaction across that set of participants or stakeholders, and there needs to be trust and kind of negotiation of trust amongst those participants, and then all the things that Ramesh highlighted earlier. So there are quite a few industries where that's important, whether it's finance, different types of financial services, or it's in healthcare where you have a number of different players in that ecosystem, or in supply chain, logistics, and so forth, or then in different parts of commerce, B2B or B2C commerce, as well as social and professional and so on. There are quite a few areas where these can be really important ways to build that, build those engagements and interactions and transactions within those ecosystems.
Absolutely.
One question here is in terms of what, if anything, should companies be when companies are building agents now? what should they consider from an architecture perspective in light of these developments in terms of how they should think about interfaces, authentication, billing, and so forth to be to be strategically ready and thoughtful about how this is going to play out?
Yeah. I mean, if you look at this OSI stack kind of a scenario on the left side, these are all very pesky problems. And we're going to see a lot of new Optas emerge, a lot of new, Swift and Visa and MasterCard emerge, and things like that. I think we're going to see a lot of these ecosystems emerge over time. Now, it remains to be seen if the incumbents will move fast enough in the agentic web, or new startups are going to emerge, new players are going to emerge. But I think if you are a large organization trying to build your agentic stack, that as you see on the left, that talk external players. Like right now, you can go to Agent Core or Salesforce, Agent Force, and so on. You can take some bits and pieces of it, but this may or may not be a best solution because you're locked into that particular ecosystem. So it's kind of a challenging situation where, in my personal discussions with many companies, they are not happy with some of these large monolithic solutions. At the same time, they haven't seen enough mature startups that are solving each of these problems as well. So we are in this very interesting phase right now where, as entrepreneurs, you can go and solve all these problems. At the same time, there's a lot of demand for it, and you may or may not be able to, solve the whole enchilada here. So I think it's a pretty there's a huge friction in enterprises right now for kind of a onset or adoption of agents, because they're kind of in this in-between phase where they just don't have sufficiently mature solutions in each of these boxes.
One of the founders here is asking, given that any organization, especially a startup, is resource constrained, if you might have any advice or guidance in terms of should startups focus on figuring out how to get their MCPs and agents working within the ChatGPT or Claude ecosystems, or should they define their agents as separate entities outside of those ecosystems in this open paradigm?
Yeah. I mean, I've seen a bunch of MCP companies raise, 5, 10, 20, $30 million now. And some of them are pretty straightforward. They're just creating, a tree of MCP servers or authentication platforms. Some of them, of course, are still getting started with A2A because it has good momentum in enterprise. So I think startups are raising significant amount of money, although it's very early days for significant revenue. And obviously, the first wave of companies will be enterprise only. It's difficult to make money in the consumer domain right now because there are just not enough agents out there in the consumer domain. So I'm guessing at least for the next 6 months to a year, we will see activity in the enterprise domain, and we will go and solve individual problems. I think enterprises are focused on MCP and A2A right now. I think just solving those problems is probably the best bet at this stage.
One of the founders who's working in more of a regulated industries asking if you have a point of view in terms of how do you ensure HIPAA compliance or FedRAMP type of compliance with agents on the web.
I've seen some startups now focus on highly regulated, HIPAA, FedRAMP, C2PA, like the various protocols and guidelines deploy that. I think it's not that difficult, honestly, to achieve that. And so if you already have go-to-market channels and channel partners, it's a relatively small shift to take something that already exists in Can you hear me?
Ramesh, I think we lost you for about 10 to 15 seconds. If you can just recap for the past 10 to 15 seconds as you were talking about ways to approach this.
Okay, looks like we lost altogether. So So I'm back on my phone now. Sorry about that. We're talking about the internet of AI agents, but even at MIT, we can't get stable internet.
Yeah, now it looks like your
I'll talk from here.
yeah, now it looks like your Wi-Fi is back.
I would say. Can you hear me?
Yes.
It looks like I'm on my computer. Apologize for that. I'm going to go quick from here and just join you from the phone. All right. You can hear me, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. Yeah, please continue.
Yeah. So if you could rewind a little bit in terms of as you were finishing comments on HIPAA and FedRAMP, and you were talking about ways to address that and make sure, and you were talking about some examples that you've already seen in terms of startups working in regulated industries.
Yeah. What I was saying before, MIT Internet kicked in, was that I think it's relatively low-hanging fruit to shift to FedRAMP, C2PA, and HIPAA and kind of industries. As long as you have good go-to-market channels, good channel partners, it's a fantastic opportunity. If you already have that partnerships in place, you can move very quickly. But again, I would caution that it's still very early days for AI agents and agentic web. And as I said, a lot of enterprises are not yet ready to launch full-fledged agents. Like even when companies go out and say, "Oh, we have 5,000 agents and 10 million agents," and so on, what they mean is that their own employees are just launching them. These are not ephemeral; they're not permanent, and they're just doing some work and they shut down and they move on, right? So these are not agents that are kind of managed through some kind of a control plane across an organization, and there's coordination between those agents and so on. We're still not there yet, but we might be there in the next few months, definitely less than a year.
Yeah. If you were to fast forward 5 years, what might signal to you that the Internet of Agents has truly arrived, and what might be some of the most visible changes we might see in how companies or individuals operate?
I have a slightly different take on this, Jukka, because I feel like I know that from an enterprise and funding and venturing point of view, we had to focus on enterprise. But my assumption is that the pop in agentic web is actually going to come from the consumer world. We can't predict which application will take off. Maybe it's AI companions, as much as we don't like this whole concept of, AI boyfriend, AI girlfriend, and AI coaches and so on. I think it might take off, and that could drive, the overall ecosystem for agentic web. And if you look at the original internet or original blockchain, they're all very scammy use cases. That's where you got gambling and pornography and dark web. That's how the web evolved in the 90s. And I think something similar might happen here, unfortunately, in the beginning. And that would, or there could be like a new ChatGPT like kind of moment where some company launches something that's extremely addictive, and then overnight you have like 1 billion users in a couple of months. And so my guess is that if you talk about 5 years, I would say in less than a year from now, we will see a consumer use case pop with hundreds of millions of consumer agents. And then that could go into two ways. That company that launches that very addictive agentic solution could create a walled gardens and start dominating all the protocols and partnerships. And we could get into a closed ecosystem. Or maybe not one use case emerges, but 5 or 6 different use cases emerge. And then, as long as more than 5 or 10 bigger players, will end up becoming an open agentic web. So I would say in 5 years from now, either we're going to be this very dystopian world, like a Facebook, Twitter kind of scenario, where nobody else could monetize those platforms except those platforms themselves. Only thing you could do is spend on those platforms, but not really make much money. Or we could be like the World Wide Web, where there are awesome companies, especially in global South. Everybody's creating their own agent, every teacher's creating their own agent, and it's a lot of fun and secure and vibrant. So let's see which way we land up. I think people on this call can actually be participants in which way this revolution is going to shift.
Exactly, and it goes back to your point that there's still a window of opportunity to shape this and be a pioneer and lead the way, but that window is not going to be open forever.
Maybe 18 months is all we have.
Right.
Yeah.
And those early leaders can really shape which way this plays out. So great. Thank you, Ramesh, and thanks to everyone for the excellent questions. We're now at the end of our time, so we'll wrap up here. And thanks again, Ramesh, for an amazing presentation and fascinating discussion. And thanks to everyone who joined us today. We hope this session gave you some valuable insights into the Internet of Agents, initiatives like NANDA that are shaping this infrastructure. And maybe, Ramesh, if you can just briefly point people to, if they want to learn more about NANDA, what's the central place to go to?
Yeah, if you're interested in research, then go to nanda.mit.edu. If you're interested in open source and reference implementations, and maybe even getting a job or a fellowship to contribute to open source, then go to projectnanda.org. So projectnanda.org.
Fantastic. So on behalf of Rebellion Ventures, thank you everyone for joining us, and thanks again, Ramesh, for sharing your insights, and have a great rest of your day, everyone.
Thank you, Jukka. Thank you, everyone.